Well, it depends on what. That has to be done on a
How are you?
See you too. I haven't either for that.
Well, hi, how are you? Good to see you. That's right. We want to know how much you want us to give you back.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my. Thank you. Person. How are you feeling today? Oh, my. Called Norm Augustine yesterday. But guess what? He's in Australia during the time of our meetings.
Our hearing will come to order now, and good morning, and welcome to this Research and Science Education Subcommittee hearing on the National Science Foundation's fiscal year 2009 budget request and related policy issues. I'm happy that despite the disappointment of the fiscal year 2008 omnibus appropriations bill, the administration remains determined to keep NSF on a doubling path, something this committee has long and strongly advocated for. The strong budget request for basic research at NSF is something that this committee commends and fully supports and will work to advocate with our colleagues. I'm happy to see that the education programs at NSF are getting an increase. However, and this is a sentiment I believe is shared by the overwhelming majority of my committee colleagues on both sides of the aisle, I am once again dismayed at the treatment of the K-12 education in the budget request. The top recommendation of the National Academies of Sciences Gathering Storm Report was to place teachers who have strong content knowledge and effective teaching skills in math and science classrooms across America. The report cited the 10-year-old University of Texas UTeach program as an example of best practices for STEM teacher education. Based on that success, UTeach has already been taken as a model by the state of California as well as the private sector. The Competes Act, passed by this committee in the House last year, used the Academy's recommendations and the UTeach as the basis for restructuring NSF's Robert Noyce Teacher Scholarship Program. It set out a funding trajectory that would enable the program to reach the goal of 10,000 new STEM teachers per year. I'm disappointed that the fiscal 2009 budget request for NOIS not only fails to reach the $103 million authorized in the Competes Act, but is actually below the fiscal year 2008 appropriations level. I'm also interested in learning more about NSF's decision to apply all of the increases in the graduate research and education to the Graduate Research Fellowship Program rather than the Integrated Graduate Education and Research Training Program, since IGERT is also an extremely well-regarded and effective program. Beyond education, I'd like to talk about the proposed changes to the major research equipment and facilities construction budget, as well as some changes proposed with respect to the icebreaker fleet. Finally, as a social science, I also want to say a word about the social and behavioral sciences. While I understand that not all fields will get an equal increase every year, I want to reiterate the importance of social sciences to all of the major challenges our nation is facing, including energy, water, health, national security, and competitiveness. Parenthetically, I would mention that Secretary Marburger was here 2 weeks ago and underscored himself the importance of social sciences. I'm interested in hearing from you today the justification for the budget request for Social, Behavioral, and Economics Directorate, and to what extent, if any, the social sciences are integrated into NSF's major research initiatives. Finally, let me end on a positive note. I was pleased with the request for a significant increase for the Office of International Science and Engineering, and I look forward to Dr. Bement's participation in an upcoming hearing which will explore the role of federal agencies, including NSF, in supporting international science and engineering cooperation. I thank our outstanding witnesses, first of all, for your great service to the country in the name of science, and also for being here with us today. And now it's my pleasure to recognize my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Vern Ehlers, for an opening statement. Dr. Ehlers?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome. In the fiscal year 2009 budget request, the administration has requested increases for both the research and educational mission of the National Science Foundation. However, the proposed increases fall short of the authorizations provided in the Competes Act of 2007, which established a 7-year doubling path for the NSF. After a below-inflationary increase provided in fiscal year 2008, due to no fault of the witnesses or of those on the dais here, the NSF has fallen off the doubling path, with a 13% increase requested for the agency, coupled with a less generous budget for other agencies, some even within the same funding subcommittee. NSF is going to have to work hard to defend and justify the reasoning behind the substantial increase. In order to return to the doubling path in fiscal year 2009, I believe NSF should be funded at the level authorized by the Competes Act. Unfortunately, we know firsthand what shortfalls mean for NSF. For the remainder of fiscal year 2008, NSF must defer solicitations and facilities maintenance, will award 1,000 fewer research grants, fund 230 fewer research fellows, and negatively impact more than 3,000 students and teachers. These are just a few of the known impacts of the unanticipated shortfall created by the fiscal year 2008 omnibus. I am very concerned that federal apathy to NSF is encouraging young scientists to choose another career. Finally, while I recognize NSF has defended the successes of the math and science partnerships, I am disappointed that only a $2.5 million increase is requested for this program. As reauthorized by the Competes Act, the Math and Science Partnership Program has the potential to make a great impact on science, technology, engineering, and math education in this country. This is simply not possible within its current budget. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses about the new initiatives proposed in the fiscal year 2009 budget, the thriving programs bearing consistent fruit, and how we can work together to implement the Competes Act. Now, let me add a personal note here, and that is, I recognize that the objectives of the two witnesses are largely the same as the objectives of those of us sitting up here. We are a victim of forces beyond our immediate control, particularly the passage of the omnibus bill last year. And that is an issue that has to be addressed. I am very disappointed with the results of the omnibus bill. I vowed to vote against it no matter what was in it because I suspected mischief. This happened a few years ago. The last time we passed an omnibus bill, NSF was one of the principal victims of that. I do not know what the reasons are for in the appropriations process or within the committees in the House and the Senate, but I'm afraid that NSF appears to be an easy victim to pilferage during an omnibus appropriations process. And I will do all I can, and I suspect my colleagues here will join me in saying we will never, ever support another omnibus bill. We will do whatever we can to fight it. I also have encouraged the White House and various members working in the White House, including the President, to, if another omnibus is presented, to flatly reject it and tell the appropriations committees to go back and do their work the way they're supposed to do it. It is unconscionable to me that a small group of individuals succeed in destroying an excellent organization such as the National Science Foundation by arbitrarily cutting the funding without considering all the factors that go into the operation of the organization. So you have our sympathies. You're here defending the indefensible in the sense that the budget presented is based largely on what was passed last year. And you have our sympathies. We are with you. It's essential for us to work together to make certain that the funding increases and that we do not have another omnibus bill disaster this coming year. Thank you very much.
Dr. Ehlers, thanks for your comments and your passion in this. I share that. You know, we look at this budget and it is posing some substantial increases. But as we all know here, the budget that proposes increases without the weight of an administration fighting to sustain those increases really won't mean anything down the road. And indeed, the result of the appropriations process in the omnibus, which I also did not support, was because of an administration mandate to reduce $20-some billion out of that. Much of that cost, unfortunately, fell to NSF and some other agencies. So it's a nice thing to put forward a budget that calls for increases. It certainly beats the reverse. So we're happy about that. But in and of itself is not enough. And so we share the concern about that. And again, the gentlemen here are not responsible for that. You worked very hard to put forward a sound budget, and we're grateful for that. I want to acknowledge the presence of Dr. McNerney and Dr. Lipinski. Thank you for joining us, gentlemen. As is the custom of the committee, if there are any members who wish to submit opening remarks for the record, we're happy to introduce those. The Chair will now introduce our witnesses, and if ever there is a case where the introduction I'm given is understated, given the distinguished careers of these two gentlemen, please forgive us. In the interest of hearing your wisdom, we'll keep the introductions brief. But Dr. Arden Bement is the Director of the National Science Foundation. Dr. Stephen Bering is the Chairman of the National Science Board. Very brief introductions for some extraordinary careers. As our witnesses should know well from prior testimony here, spoken testimony is limited to 5 minutes, but that's really designed to hit the highlights, and then we'll have a good exchange. And always I want to invite, especially gentlemen such as yourselves, if there are things that we don't cover in our questions, but you feel you want to elaborate on, please, this is a friendly process, and feel free to elaborate on that. We'll start our testimony with Dr. Berman. Thank you again.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I may, before reading my prepared remarks, I want to reflect on your opening remarks. In spite of the 08 Omnibus Bill, I want to express on behalf of the National Science Foundation our deep gratitude for the very strong support this committee gave our entire budget, but also the programs within the budget. I also want to express our appreciation for the confidence you've shown us in increasing the education authorization and the specific programs in the America Competes Act. I believe that we have outstanding programs, and they're very much in the interest of the nation, and I appreciate your support. Going on with my remarks, I'm pleased to present the National Science Foundation.
We won't count those against you. We don't count compliments of the committee against your time, your 5-minute time. Doctor, I should acknowledge also the various directors are along here with you today. We want to thank them for their work. They probably won't be testifying, but thank you for coming and for your work. Please proceed, Dr.
Thank you. Chairman Baird, Ranking Member Ehlers, and members of the subcommittee, I'm pleased to present the National Science Foundation's budget for the 2009 fiscal year. NSF proposes an investment of $6.85 billion to advance the frontiers of science and engineering, research, and education. Our budget request includes an increase of $789 million, or 13%, over fiscal year 2008. This increase is necessary to put NSF back on the course that was chartered by the America Competes Act and the President's America Competitiveness Initiative. This budget reflects the administration's continued resolve to double overall funding for the NSF within 10 years. I would also like to thank you for recognizing the importance of our agency operations and award management account in the 2008 omnibus appropriation. Our stewardship activities allow us to serve award recipients with tools such as the new grants management website, research.gov, and this is a tough account to get strong support. The timing of this testimony coincides with a period of economic uncertainty in our country. I've come here today to tell you that an investment in the National Science Foundation is an investment in America's economic security. NSF provides two essential ingredients of a healthy, high-tech economy: basic research discoveries and a highly trained workforce. For over 50 years, NSF has been the foundation of innovation, fostering great ideas and the great minds who discover them. NSF discoveries have led to many of the technological innovations you and I take for granted today, and yet, for fiscal year 2008, NSF's budget increase fails to keep up with inflation. By contrast, other nations of the world are steadily increasing their investments in STEM education and basic R&D. I assure you, multinational companies will have no problem relocating their operations to the countries where they can find the best trained workforce and the latest research ideas. The world is changing. Lead times for new products are shrinking. Now more than ever, basic research discoveries are essential to keeping the wheels of innovation turning in America's high-tech companies. It is not merely enough to maintain the federal R&D investment status quo. It is our solemn obligation to keep up with corporate America's demand for innovative people and ideas. At NSF, we are responsible to emerging, potentially transformative areas of research. I would like to highlight some of our new cross-cutting multidisciplinary initiatives. We created these initiatives in response to the input we received from the research communities we serve. We request $100 million to continue cyber-enabled discovery and innovation, our bold 5-year initiative to apply revolutionary computational tools and concepts to all fields of science, engineering, and education. Our request includes $20 million for science and engineering beyond Moore's Law. This initiative aims to position the United States at the forefront of communications and computation, moving us beyond the limitations of current systems. We are requesting $15 million to fund adaptive systems technology, our new effort aimed at using all aspects of biological science to inspire transformative new technologies. Our request of $10 million for the Dynamics of Water Processes in the Environment initiative will bring together researchers from various disciplines to enhance our ability to understand the complexities of freshwater systems at regional and local levels. In addition to our ongoing efforts in transformative research, we believe that a truly competitive workforce is one that reflects the full potential and diversity of the American people themselves. Our efforts to broaden participation in science and technology target students at all education levels and from all geographic areas. We train the nation's skilled workforce by providing research opportunities for undergraduates, graduate students, and postdocs. We research and evaluate effective STEM curricula for the nation's K-12 classrooms and provide opportunities for teacher education. And we develop innovative programs for informal science and technology learning for students young and old, in museums, through the mass media, and through other outreach activities that touch the imaginations of millions of Americans. Mr. Chairman, time does not permit me to describe the many other numerous activities NSF sponsors to strengthen and support our nation's science and technology research and education. NSF's relatively small size belies its catalytic impact on all sectors of the economy. I'm hard-pressed to think of another example in which the taxpayers derive such a tremendous return on investment. Thank you for extending me the invitation to speak with this subcommittee today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Good morning, Chairman Barrett, Ranking Member Ehlers, and members of the subcommittee. I very much appreciate the opportunity to address you today. My name is Stephen Bering, and I'm the chairman of the National Science Board. I'm honored to represent the 24 members of this board before you today. Let me first thank the members of the subcommittee for your long-term commitment and support of the National Science Foundation and its investments in a broad portfolio of research and education. We also applaud your strong bipartisan support for legislation over the past year that will bolster U.S. leadership in science and technology, including the passage of H.R. 2272, the America Competes Act. The National Science Board and the broader science and engineering community were surprised and disappointed by the actual appropriations in the fiscal year 08 Omnibus Bill, which erased most of the anticipated increases in support for research. In such an uncertain funding climate, we are concerned with the signal this sends to our potential partners in international science projects, but also the message we send to international and American students who may be deterred from pursuing science and engineering careers in this country. As many other countries invest heavily in science and engineering research, graduate a record number of scientists and engineers, and increase incentives to attract outstanding international students and scholars, it is a dangerous time for the U.S. to neglect our science and engineering enterprise. The National Science Board is committed to helping this country maintain our leadership in science and technology. In addition to its policy and oversight role at NSF, the Board has also addressed a number of significant policy issues for U.S. science and engineering. The Board is working, for example, with NSF to implement recommendations in several recent education reports, including a national action plan for addressing the critical needs of the U.S. science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education system, moving forward to improve engineering education, the hurricane warning, the critical need for a national hurricane research initiative, enhancing support for transformative research at the National Science Foundation, and the Science and Engineering Indicators 08, which includes the digest of key science and engineering indicators and a companion piece policy statement entitled Research and Development, Essential Foundation for U.S. Competitiveness in a Global Economy. We will be introducing an additional report next month on international science and engineering partnerships, a priority for U.S. foreign policy and our nation's innovation enterprise. In response to the America Competes Act, the Board has undertaken a number of actions. We recently sent reports to Congress to make recommendations on NSF policies regarding cost sharing and on pre-construction and management and operations cost coverage under the Major Research Equipment and Facilities Construction account, and will be preparing a final report for Congress on this subject this year. The Board is also reviewing the impacts of NSF policies on interdisciplinary research and on limiting the number of proposals per institution of higher education for some awards. The Board will report back to Congress on both of these issues by August of this year. Finally, the Board will evaluate a pilot program of grants for new investigators at NSF and report the findings to Congress by August of 2010. For FY09, the request for the National Science Board is $4.03 million, an increase of 1.5% over FY08. Next year's budget will allow the Board to strengthen its oversight and policy duties for NSF and provide independent scientific advice for the President and Congress. In addition, the Board will continue to increase communication and outreach with all of our stakeholders. For example, we continue to engage with numerous stakeholders to implement recommendations from our STEM Education Action Plan. The National Science Board supports the FY09 budget for NSF and for basic science research in other agencies at the President's request, so that we can begin to make up for the opportunities that we will miss this year under the FY08 Omnibus Appropriations Bill. You have my pledge on behalf of the Board that we will continue to work closely with the NSF Director to ensure that funding decisions continue to provide maximum returns on the taxpayers' investment in our nation's future. Thank you very much.
Thank you both. Been joined by Eddie Bernice Johnson from Texas. Johnson, thank you for joining us, who's been a champion of women and minority issues in science, and actually that is a nice segue to one of the questions I wanted to ask. We had a very informative hearing a while back on issues pertaining particularly to women's role in science. Donna Shalala was here, as Dr. Olson as well testified, and I noted with some concern, I think as I read the budget, a proposal to reduce funding for Advance. And Advance was one of the programs that have been cited as, if used well, particularly effective in making the kind of institutional-wide cultural changes that lead to retention. One of the issues that came up clearly in our hearing was that we have a fair number of women in the science pipeline coming out of high schools, fair number entering college, but at the upper levels, we have a dramatic drop-off, and Advance seems to do some of the cultural things to change that. Could you comment a little bit about that, if you would, and if what else is being done as manifested in the budget to address women and minority role in science?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Advance is a program that is jointly funded by our research and related accounts and also our EHR account. We do plan a solicitation in 08 in spite of the reduced funding in 08. We have some funding flexibility in 09 that if we have meritorious awards that we would like to fund, we'll try and find additional funding to do that.
So it sounds like you feel fairly committed to the program as well, still.
We've always, yes, we are very committed to the program.
Talk to us a little bit, if you would, about the role of international science. One of the things this committee I mentioned earlier is going to focus a great deal on is scientific diplomacy and international scientific collaboration. If you could address some of those programs as reflected in this budget and in your perspective on their role in the mission, Dr. Bering and Dr. Bement, either.
Thank you. As I mentioned, we are going to have a full report forthcoming very shortly. We hope by the 28th of March. Our first priority in the International Science Commission has been to generate a clear, coherent, and integrated national strategy. Second priority is to balance U.S. foreign policy with the R&D policy. And the third priority is to enhance a global mobility of scientists and engineers. When our commission met in Brussels on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of the European Union, and I must admit I hadn't realized they'd been at it for 50 years, we were thrilled by their openness and their willingness to share across national boundaries scientific knowledge. Science is an international language, and knowledge has no boundaries. And it wasn't a question of financial support, it was a question of willingness to share and to work together. And so we'd like to see that our international science efforts can be coordinated to become a true instrument of international policy.
Yes, thank you. The international activities of the National Science Foundation are not only very broad, but also very appreciated throughout the world. And it's very difficult to summarize briefly the full scope of activities in our international programs. So with your permission, I'd like to submit for the record a summary report on those activities. But they include a broad range of research collaborations, not only with the developed economies, but also with the developing economies throughout the world. It includes institutional interactions. I should also say up front that we only fund the U.S. part of those interactions on a true partnership basis. We engage in exchanges of undergraduate, graduate, and postdoc students to give them a research experience in different parts of the world. We engage in international organizations such as UNESCO and OECD and the World Bank to help promote capacity building in the developing world. And we're also a principal player on most of the bilateral exchanges that are coordinated by the State Department. In fact, in just the last 3 or 4 weeks, I've spoken to the science counselors of all the major embassies here in Washington, and I've had 2 luncheons with key ambassadors, especially in Europe, hosted by Undersecretary Dobryansky. So a good bit of my time and my deputy's time and also our assistant director's time is spent engaged in these types of international activities.
We applaud that, and we look forward to the hearing. 2 other quick comments, and then we'll go to my recognized my friend, Mr. Ehlers. You mentioned, Dr. Bering, the hurricane warning process, and clearly we need to make improvements in that area and improve our accuracy and location, magnitude, etc. But this is a chance for me to also raise the question I asked earlier about the social sciences as well. I've spoken to some hurricane forecasters, and actually if you look at Katrina, we were pretty good. They were pretty good, not we, but they were pretty good in terms of saying where it was going to hit, what its magnitude was, what the potential impacts were, etc. The challenge was not so much the accuracy, the prediction of timing, location, and magnitude. It was partly getting people to pay attention, and that seems to me to be a social science issue. And I note that the budget for social science research is actually a good bit less in terms of its increase than is the budget for other areas of the overall budget proposal. If either of you care to talk about that, I'd appreciate that.
Yes, thank you. Social science at the National Science Foundation is integrated throughout the foundation. It's one of the threads that threads through the foundation. And it's especially important in areas of national need. You mentioned disruptive storm events like hurricanes, but it also plays a critical role in terrorism, homeland security. In most of our cross-foundation initiatives, you'll find it in environmental health and safety with regard to nanotechnology. And you're correct that it's important to understand how decisions are made, because Katrina, after all, was not just a natural disaster, it was a human disaster as well. And it was fell far short of adequate performance among the key decision makers. So we very much support social science. With regard to the allocation of resources, social science in terms of dollar amount had in the 09 budget, has in the 09 budget one of the largest incremental increases for years. Biosciences has the largest increase in about 8 years. We not only had to pay attention to their role throughout all of our programs in the foundation, but alignment of our overall program to the goals of the American Competitiveness Initiative and the America Competes Act. So the main objective is to be sure we have healthy increases in all the programs, but also to pay attention to the alignment.
I respect and understand that. I would just underscore that the American Competes Act was explicit that social sciences should share in the increase. It has to a degree, but I have concerns.
I agree.
I'll recognize my distinguished colleague, Dr. Ehlers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I do want to commend the majority for the beautiful redecoration of this room. It looks very nice. I assume we will soon return the portraits and perhaps disturb the decor.
We're looking for an alternative to Tennyson, by the way, if anyone wants to offer that.
Just don't try changing the Bible quote. But in any event, I think it would be nice, however, if you could turn the heat back on. Now that
We're lowering our carbon footprint.
It's not in the budget.
Letters are available to lobby.
yes. At any rate, Dr. Bement, an essential element in NSF's mission is support for science and engineering education from pre-K through grad school and beyond. I would appreciate if you could explain why your new budget, FY09 budget, does not include funding for many of the NSF STEM education activities authorized in the Competes Act. And I know you're short of money, but I'd just like to know the rationale.
Yes, we are short of money. First of all, let me take the Math and Science Partnership Program. I think the increase there was about $2.5 million, which in percentage terms doesn't look like a lot, but it's a turnaround from where we were 2 or 3 years ago, where we were declining at the rate of our mortgage payments with very little flexibility for new starts. The budget in 09 will allow us to not only cover our continuing grants, but to invest $15 million in new starts. So we expect to have about 15 to 17 new awards. Now that's a big change. And most of that change came about as a result of our assessments over the last 2 years that demonstrated very clearly that we're making tremendous headway in our Math and Science Partnership school districts and schools in improving math education and also science education at almost all levels. The only problem is at the middle school level for science, but in all other categories there's very positive improvement. In some of the other programs, the assessments either haven't been completed or they're still in progress, and under the Deficit Reduction Act of 05 and the establishment of the American Competitiveness Council, the philosophy is show me. Show me that these programs are effective through rigorous third-party assessments before the funding increases, and so that's the environment under which we're currently operating. I'm very optimistic, however, that our programs are strong and the assessments that are currently underway will be positive, and we will be able to grow those budgets and get them closer to the authorization levels.
Thank you. Dr. Bering, you put a lot of work into the developing the National Action Plan for STEM education. And I'm curious what feedback the National Science Board has received on that report, and to what extent the board is still involved with implementing some of its recommendations, in particular how the FY09 budget reflects any role the NSF might have in that.
Thank you, first of all, for your personal support and encouragement. I think by and large there's been a national consensus that we need to have a change in attitude and commitment and bring education, particularly science education, into the curriculum very early on. The big problem is the logistics of 95,000 different school board members, and that's where the pushback has also come. We had a hearing in this very room here a few months ago where that came out, as you recall, and nonetheless, I feel that there is broad-based support for the major recommendations of having horizontal and vertical alignment and having the teachers better prepared than they are now. There is concern that teachers don't stay in the profession long enough. There's concern that they are not paid at the level of their counterparts in business and industry with similar preparation. And I've had a lot of reactions from business and industry that agrees with that perception and hope to be helpful to us. So the early results of that have been very pleasing to us, and I think we'll continue to make progress.
On the issue of the vertical and horizontal alignment of standards, that brings forward another issue that I've been preaching about for several years. And in fact, Senator Dodd and I have introduced a bill trying to develop voluntary national standards for the sciences. I think we have tremendous problems in this country because of the diversity of governance of the schools, with the local school boards, the state boards of education, and so forth. But then in addition, beyond that, because we are such an incredibly mobile society, a student can take classes in one school building, move 10 miles, and find the sequence of subjects is different. What do you think the vertical and horizontal alignment will take care of that, or do you think we should develop these voluntary standards, which I would hope would at least take care of the sequencing and the major components of these would not be mandatory, but at least would be good suggestions for. I appreciate your comments on that.
I think, again, there's agreement that voluntary standards would be quite helpful. There's a concern that any proposed legislation would mandate a federal coordinating council rather than a voluntary coordinating organization as we have proposed. And I think that is the single issue that I've had the most comment on from people wondering, are we really serious about having a non-federal coordinating council? And if so, that would be all right and that would be helpful.
Yeah, and I think there would be general agreement in the Congress that that would be good as well, as long as it is established well and it has the ability to operate in a way that will produce results. I see my time has expired. I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Raiders. Dr. McNerney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bering, in your written testimony, you indicate that there is a growing public support for increasing federal funding for research, for scientific research. Do you attribute that to awareness of the link between that kind of expenditure and our national economic well-being? And if so, and even if not so, what do you propose or what do you recommend in terms of keeping that enthusiasm alive and growing for public support?
I think people are increasingly aware of the scientific advances that are being publicized through the media, and they're hopeful that this will produce nirvana and long life and health and happiness. And it's more a hope than a reality in many instances. But I'm happy that there is this positive support rather than the opposite.
So no recommendations on how to continue to grow that public support?
I don't have any special ones, no.
Well, okay, Dr. Bement,
Yes.
thank you for coming here today. And I certainly, you'll find fewer people, you'll find nobody that's more sympathetic toward funding for science education than myself and members of this board here. You indicated that since 1970, the federal investment in physical sciences has been halved as a percentage of GDP. At the same time, we know that our competitors like India and China are increasing their support. And in fact, an often repeated phrase, the Chinese are putting out more English-speaking engineers per year than the Americans are now. So do you believe there's a direct correlation between federal funding and the number of engineers and scientists that we're turning out?
Oh, absolutely. I should point out that almost all the funding provided to the National Science Foundation supports our innovation system one way or the other. For example, our research grants are actually used to train and educate graduate students who go right into the innovation system. Our graduate fellowships and traineeships have very much the same purpose. The problem is that the growth in demand for scientists and engineers is increasing at about 5% per year, but the growth in degrees is only increasing at about 1.5% per year. Furthermore, we're reaching a period where baby boomers are retiring at an ever-increasing rate, so that many of our federal labs, whether they're defense or non-defense, are going to start hollowing out before too long.
So by supply and demand, then you'd expect that there to be increasing salaries offers for these types of trained people.
I think over a career, you would find that these are very lucrative career paths. China and India have gotten the message that what's driving the economy in a knowledge environment is education and investment in research. So both India and China are investing quite substantial sums in improving the quality of their education, especially at the graduate levels, master's and PhD programs. And the equation there is very simple, that if you produce the high-level talent, industry will find their way to your doorstep. And if you look at the writings of Craig Barrett, Norm Augustine, they're the Cassandras that see the future quite clearly, because they're in the process of seeing this migration begin to take place. And I believe we only have a reasonable period of time before we address this question. That's why our budget for 09 is highly skewed to train the graduate students and provide the fellowships and traineeships that will begin to address this in the near term rather than the longer term.
Well, that sort of segues into my next question, was that the Compete Act does authorize a new pilot program for young investigators that don't have the reputation to get the big grants. Do we expect to see that program implemented in some form in the coming fiscal year?
We're currently, I have working groups working on all the sections of the America Competes Act to figure out, first of all, how to come in compliance with all the requirements in the Act, and we're making good progress on that. Also to begin designing the new programs that are called for in the Act. Some of those I think we can start in 08, but we need the flexibility in 09 to really bring them up to a decent level. With regard to young investigators, if you look at the distribution curve of funding and numbers of grants as a function of years from last degree, namely the PhD degree for most, what you'll find is a distribution that's skewed very strongly toward younger investigators. In fact, the peak of the curve occurs at about 6 to 7 years after the PhD, and then it trails off over time. And what we're discovering is that about 30% of all new investigator grants go to young investigators that are about 5 years from their PhD. And that comes as a result of our paying attention to young investigators through our career grants, through many other grants that favor young investigators. But I think more than anything else, it's the fact that we reserve a healthy fraction of our core program to fund unsolicited grants, and young investigators would normally submit unsolicited grants in order to support their particular interest.
So you're talking about numbers of grants or numbers of dollars when you say that when you talked about the skew?
Both. We plotted it both ways.
Mr. Berman from California. Thank you, Mr. Berman. Dr. Lipinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Dr. Bement and Dr. Bering for their testimony and for all the work that they do. This is one of the most critical areas for our country and doesn't really get the attention I think that it deserves. I'm going to have probably some further questions. I am, as you know, a political scientist, and I have some further questions on that in writing, but a couple other things I want to ask you here. First of all, when the administration it used the Academic Competitiveness Council's assessment of the effectiveness of federal STEM ed programs as part of its justification for its budget decisions for NSF's Education and Human Resources Directorate. The Academic Competitiveness Council, ACC, was chaired by Education Secretary Spellings, and the ACC found that a number of NSF programs did not have adequate evaluations. So I want to ask Dr. Bement, would you agree with the report's conclusions that NSF education programs are not properly evaluated?
No, I disagree, and disagree quite strongly. Evaluation is a very critical part of all of our education programs in EHR, our Education Human Resources Directorate. Starting in 1997, we required assessments and evaluations on every one of our programs, and even now with all incoming grants we require an assessment plan as part of the grant, and that's considered in awarding a grant. Now there's clearly a difference of opinion on whether random control testing is the gold standard. I think you would recognize that in the NOICE program, where you particularly select people for scholarships, that's not necessarily a random process. So you violate external measures as well as internal measures statistically in that kind of an evaluation. Furthermore, To do a random control test, you have to have sufficient numbers that are statistically significant. And if you're doing research, it depends on the stage of the research. If you're doing implementation, it depends on the stage of implementation. Now, we work pretty much at the project and the program level, so that in many cases, a well-regulated comparison group study is a better means of evaluation in the earlier stages of the program where changes are occurring dramatically, rather than just taking a snapshot to a random control test to see what the status is near the stage of scale-up. So I think we're using the proper instruments. I think we're getting the results that we need in order to establish that our programs are effective. And we work very closely with the Department of Education in scaling up our programs so that eventually they will be proven effective through random control testing as well.
So it's just basically a disagreement over the what good testing, what good evaluation is. I'm concerned that there is certainly a battle going on in terms of who is going to do our STEM education. Is it the Department of Education or the NSF?
Well,
I certainly believe that the NSF has shown, at least to me, that NSF has done a very good job of doing this over the years.
I want to make one point clear, and that is that first of all, even though Secretary Spelling's chaired the American Competitiveness Council, I was a very vocal member on that council, as are a number of other agency heads. Furthermore, in the working groups that established the report that was presented to Congress last May, those working groups were either chaired or co-chaired by NSF staff. So we stand behind the recommendations in that report, and you'll note that the recommendations do provide a flexibility for how to evaluate different types of programs. And again, I would assert that we're in full conformance with the recommendations of the report.
Very good. One other thing I wanted to raise, the National Nanotechnology Initiative only gets a 2% increase, which is actually below the inflation rate. Why is the NNI getting such a low increase, or actually a decrease when you consider inflation?
Well, we have a way of determining whether a program has begun to reach the flat part of a learning curve, and that is based on the quality of proposals that we receive in the program. And when the number of potentially transformative ideas or the number of excellent proposals begin to taper off, that's the time to start moderating the funding. Now, most of the priority in the NNI program in this budget is an increase in environmental health and safety research. And the reason for that is pretty obvious, and that is that in any new technology, one has to be aware of health and safety considerations. NSF has been a leader in this program in this regard since the beginning of the program. We've always held apart something of the order of 7% of our total budget in order to look at EHS issues. And I feel the time has come to increase that because we are seeing a lot of variability in the research results and the test results on the effect of engineered nanoparticles on human cells and other factors, and a lot of that variability is just lack of rigorous characterization of the particles, and so we have to develop better instrumentation, better protocols, and better means and better standards. Incidentally, we're working with NIST in trying to back up some of the standards to reduce that variability so that we can have confidence in the results.
Thank you. I see my time is up.
Thanks, Dr. Lipinski. Dr. Bement, I applaud your defense of methodologies, and recognize Ms. Johnson in 1 second. I would just, as someone who used to teach statistics, to try to get folks to understand that the very premise of a test of statistical significance assumes random assignment, and you're comparing the actual observed difference in your two subject groups with what might occur through random assignment. If you don't have random assignments, the premise of a test of statistical significance is really called into doubt. And there's a rather slavish dependence on this, I think, by the Department of Education, which in itself may be symptomatic of some of the problems in our education system. Ms. Johnson.
I have always had great admiration for the National Science Foundation and felt that it was one of the most accountable agencies that we had. And I think at this point, one of the most important, since we need this America Competes Act implemented. As I think about the future of the space program, of our high-tech, all of the things that even our air controllers, we need so many more people than what we're training involved. Could you give me an idea of how much implementation you can do with the current budget that you are defending?
Yes, thank you. Our concern about this issue is more than just the level of funding and the number of programs, but how those programs align themselves and provide synergy among the different programs. For example, in education, in order to reduce waste and leakage in the pipeline, we feel that a 2+2+2 approach is necessary, and this is recognized in our innovation of institutional integration, which is a way of aligning different programs by focusing on a particular strategy. The strategy here is to focus on the last 2 years of high school, the first 2 years of undergraduate training, and the second 2 years of undergraduate training. That's the 2+2. And of course, the first 2 years of undergraduate training also brings in the community colleges as well. And what we want to do is look at the critical junctures between those programs and get those programs aligned so that we can have greater success in retention, but also pre-college preparation at the secondary school level. So that's going to be a hallmark of our 09 initiatives in the budget, and we feel that this can be very effective.
In other words, what you're saying is you are adequately funded for the beginning of the implementation.
I think in the 09 budget, we're happy with the way we've aligned the budget to meet those objectives. Yes, it'll give us a good start.
Thank you very much.
Just a couple of further questions, if I might. My understanding is that there was a significant increase in the administrative budget of NSF, and that was very much needed to keep up with increasing demand. And no, it came under some assault in the appropriations process. I would urge my colleagues on this committee to not fall victim to that, no matter how seductive the offset may seem to be, because if we're going to process these programs, we need people in the administrative offices, and I think NSF keeps its overhead relatively low. Would either of you like to talk about the current status and some of the changes that have been made in that area?
Thank you. Well, as a result of the good action we had in the 08 budget, we're going to be able to start immediately in addressing some of the very critical staff shortages that we currently have, especially among program officers who are under tremendous pressure. But the agency operation and award management budget is more than just people and space. It deals with our pre-award activities as well as our post-award accountability for how programs are actually carried out. And it also includes adequate travel so that program officers can do post-award management. In addition to that, it also supports security and all of our information technology programs that deal with e-government, that deal with the essential application programs that we use to operate, namely our fast lane process, the new website, grants.gov, and also internal, trying to automate internal operations within the foundation in order to continually improve our productivity. And it's a productivity increase that's been so dramatic over the years. Our proposal volume has gone up by almost a factor of 3 or so, and yet our staff costs have been held at only a slight increase. Those are very worthwhile investments, and we get a lot of return on those investments, and we're still able to keep our overhead costs to within about 5%.
Given the complexity of the issues that your folks have to deal with, the level of technical demand, the complexity of the programs that are put forward, the diversity of issues that NSF deals with, I think you should be acknowledged and the appreciation extended from this committee. And as I say, we'll do whatever we can to try to make sure the administrative budget stays
very much appreciated. Thank you.
I want to also compliment you. I'm pleased to see the water initiative. It shocks me how little we know about water. We're made of water. The planet's largely made of water, at least the part we live near. And I believe water will become a signature issue of this century. And the amount of fresh drinking water available on this planet is very small, and it's diminishing through pollution, et cetera. And so I applaud NSF's directive in that area. I want to raise one question, and I don't really expect an answer here. I just want to, just for the record, first, by way of compliment, we had the great privilege of going down to Antarctica, and golly, the American people should see what a remarkable achievement has happened down there. The science is world class. The conditions under which it occurs are extraordinarily difficult, and your people are to be absolutely commended for the work, and I congratulate you on the opening of the new South Pole Center. It's quite an accomplishment, and we're proud of what our country can do in that area. A slight negative note, or a question, I guess is better put. I noticed in the budget report I don't know how much money was spent, but some art project that consisted of putting spheres out on the ice somewhere to simulate the heavens. I'm probably one of the fewer people, or latest people in this Congress to demagogue against humanities and art spending, but I have a sense now, having been there, of the logistics of getting equipment and people down to that part of the world, and I just would query for future budgetary needs whether or not such expenditures are maybe better left to the National Endowment of the Humanities, or maybe better left to, if people want to appreciate the heavens, go look at the sky at night, the Rocky Mountains or something, and you'll get a sense of how they fairly much supersede the experience of a few spherical objects placed on the ice. So in future budgets, you might want to have a look at whether...
Chairman Barrett, you raise an issue I should be concerned about, so with your permission, I'd like to look into it and report back to you in writing.
We are very proud and happy on this committee, Dr. Ehlers and myself, to steadfastly defend scientific projects and peer review on the floor of the House. It'd be more difficult for me to defend that particular project, perhaps. And one question I have as we look at the increase in funding. One of the challenges that NSF has faced and was acknowledged in the Rising Above the Gathering Storm is the growing disparity between availability of grants that actually get funded to researchers and applications. And I hear this from researchers in all branches of science. When they apply to federal grants, their probability of success is going down. Now, as we see an increase in funding, what happens, because we're also seeing an increase in demand? Are we still losing ground, but losing ground at a slower rate than we used to lose it, or are we keeping pace now with if we were to enact the proposed 09 budget?
Well, if we enact the 09 budget, that will increase our success rate by about 2 percentage points. So it's not a one budget cycle issue. On the other hand, that will greatly reduce the amount of churn in the system. And churn is a very big issue, not only for the investigators, but also the people that devote time for merit review. When they start seeing the same proposal over and over again, they wonder whether their time is being well spent. There are provisions in the America Competes Act that will help us in this matter, and we're also studying other ways in which we can, near the end of a fiscal year, hold proposals that are fundable over for funding in the succeeding fiscal year. And anything we can do to reduce the amount of churn would of course, be in the right direction.
I think that's so important for members of this committee, but for the entire Congress to understand, is the impact of worthwhile projects competing against other worthwhile projects, and when they don't get funded, especially early career investigators, really they actually give up at some point, and very promising lines of research and promising investigators may go in other directions that are probably damaging to our overall competitiveness. Dr. Ehlers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a few additional questions. Dr. Bement, during your testimony, you mentioned several new key investments, the science and engineering beyond Moore's Law, adaptive systems technology, and the dynamics of water processes, which we just discussed a moment ago. Could you give us more details on what the projects are and how the money is going to be spent?
Science and engineering beyond Moore's Law recognizes that we're about to reach an end point because we're reaching quantum limits in silicon technology. And our estimate is that we'll probably reach the end of Moore's Law in about 20 years, maybe sooner. So this is the time now that we should begin to look at alternate technologies in order to get on a new law. And there are promising technology technologies that will use molecular electronics, for example, carbon nanotube technology, quantum dot technology, even quantum computing. And so what we would like to do is increase our investment in these alternate technologies so that when the time comes, we'll be prepared to keep going, and not only to make information systems more compact, but even more ubiquitous than they are today. On the second initiative, adaptive systems technology, the human brain can do things better than electrical mechanical systems with regard to interpreting sensor signals in terms of motor control, nerve and motor control, and also in terms of analytical thinking, which enables the human being to both anticipate and also to adapt to change. As we learn more about the brain, the nervous system, and the sensory systems, we feel that we can take that knowledge and, if you will, reverse engineer it, although that's a crude term, but nevertheless to embed some means of adaptation and anticipation in engineered systems. Let me just give you a couple examples. We feel by using smart agents we can develop a much more robust electric power grid, where it would be possible to anticipate upset conditions in time to actually take corrective action, either by load shedding or bringing on new capacity. In our computing systems and also in our networks, we could use these adaptive technologies or anticipatory technologies to identify intruders in the systems and to counter intruders in a much more natural and much more effective way. In human prostheses, we have already begun seeing development of artificial retinas that will enable the blind to see, and also artificial cochleas that will enable the deaf to hear. We already have amazing developments in connecting the brain to the nervous system in order to restore muscular activity and also nervous activity, to restore sensory activity. We feel that these are emerging technologies that are not only being paid attention to in Europe and also Asia, where the investments are going up, but I think we in this country have an opportunity to establish leadership and maintain leadership in these areas, and because of the broad range of scientific and engineering disciplines that NSF supports through interdisciplinary research, I think we can really make good progress in this area. In the case of the Waters Initiative, there are changing patterns in our hydrological system caused by ecological changes, climate change, and so forth. But also there are major changes in water usage. For example, we aspire to produce ethanol fuels from biomass. That requires an enormous amount of water, not only for growing the crops, but also for processing the ethanol. Now the question is, over time, is that sustainable? Will the water be where the biomass is? Because the processing plants have to be reasonably close to the source in order to make it economically feasible. That's just one example, but there are many others. As we look ahead on a national basis, there's a great possibility that there'll be growing drought conditions in the central part of the country. There'll be more violent storms and more water deposited in the coastal regions where it runs off and flows into the ocean. We don't have effective catchment to hold on to that water. So being able to do long-term forecasting, both on a regional basis and also on a local basis of what these changes may amount to, is critically important. Just another example would be the increasing flow of fresh water into the Atlantic Ocean from the Arctic Ocean and the seas around the Arctic Ocean, just due to the melting of ice. That could lead to disruptive climate change. So the purpose of this initiative is to begin to put the computational tools in place to model these interactive events of the changes in the ecology and climate with the changes in the hydrological systems in order to inform other federal agencies that are really engaged in this area as well, what changes are likely to come about and what meaningful strategies there may be for adaptation and mitigation of some of these changes.
Quick follow-up. Is this new money, or are you repackaging existing programs to try to achieve this?
There are ongoing efforts in each of the directorates. This new money will link these together and form a more interdisciplinary approach to the problem.
Okay, and
so
finally,
it's not just reshuffling the cards, it's adding another component to the overall program.
I'll be very interested in seeing the details on that. And I do have to add, as a resident of the Great Lakes, that no matter what you do with water, don't take a drop out of the Great Lakes water basin. We have militia prepared to deal with that.
Maybe Michigan will be our biomass state of the future.
Probably.
Don't worry, Congressman, we'll only take the Canadian water. How about that?
Mr. McNerney, Dr. McNerney.
Thank you. Speaking of climate change, one of the objectives of the National Science Foundation in climate change is to provide products for decision makers. Could you describe what products are available that have already been produced, what validation there is of those products, and what sort of products you see coming up in the future?
Yes. One of the most important products that we support is the development of sophisticated climate models that are used to measure not only the rate of climate change, but also the cause, the forcing functions that lead to climate change. A good bit of that work is done at the National Center for Atmospheric Research, NCAR, but it's supported at other centers as well, at universities. And incidentally, that work feeds into the International Panel for Climate Change that got the Nobel Peace Prize. So we feel that we have a piece of that prize. I think it's the first Peace Prize that the National Science Foundation has supported. But beyond that, the work that we do in the polar regions, which was touched on in terms of looking at paleoclimate change over time, looking back over the previous glacier cycles to understand what regularity there may be in some of these changes is critically important. So we're investing in ice core drilling and also drilling in sediment beds, and the Andro project, which was done jointly with Germany and New Zealand, where we're drilling back 5 million years. That's important. We're now joining with the Russians to do similar drilling in Elgagitin Lake near Kamchatka in order to also go back to that period of time. But, you know, that just touches on a few areas of work in climate change. Our oceanography program is also engaged. Our NEON community is looking forward to developing a national system to sense climate change through the National Ecological Observing System and network. And so it's not just the computational models, it's the tools. It's the Arctic Observing Network that we hope to put in place in concert with a number of other nations to measure changes not only in the climate but also in ocean circulation that affects the climate, and try and understand why in Greenland, for example, the center of the ice shield is growing because of more precipitation, whereas it's eroding in the coastal margins just due to warming effects. And we find those effects throughout the Arctic Ocean as well as in Antarctica as well. So that's pretty much just a snapshot of some of the things that we're doing in this area.
That's my only question.
Dr. McNerney, Mr. Bilbray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was glad you brought up the artificial retina. Extraordinary breakthroughs. And you think about Star Trek, and I forget the name of the character who had the special glasses, and I actually had the privilege of breaking bread with a young man who actually has those glasses and that artificial retina, and I just hope we don't become so jaded that we start not being in awe of these breakthroughs. But the chairman talked about the water, and one thing we've learned in Southern California, that water itself is not an answer, that you've got to have clean, cheap electricity to either transport the water or to purify it, like we're doing with reverse osmosis. Dr. Bering, you mentioned in your testimony a task force on sustainable energy, and about the meetings earlier this month, and with the various stakeholders here. I wondered if you could bring us up to steam about if there's any preliminary statements or information with the forthcoming report, and give us an update on what the task force is sort of hitting on.
Well, the task force has had its first meeting, and we're trying to find dates where the group can get together for another meeting. We heard testimony from a variety of subject matter experts, and I'm encouraged that there really is a great deal of activity, both by the public and the private sector, that is focusing on this entire set of issues. And it isn't just the populist notions, but some very scientific and fundamental things that are going on. But it would be too early for me to give you any specific answers.
The I just had a meeting with Mary Nichols. It's kind of funny, we've switched roles. She was at EPA here, and I was at the Air Resources Board in California, and now she is chairwoman of Air Resources, and now I'm over here. And one of the there's some big concerns we've raised, and I don't know if the committee's looking at it or reviewing it, because we talk so much about the challenges from a science and engineering point of view, but is the committee also looking at the challenges of the regulatory barriers to sustainable energy sources? One of the biggest concerns we have in California is the fact that we may have, as Californians tend to do, actually outlawed the process that could be addressing our, could be our answers. Is that even being discussed at all in this?
I'm glad you brought that to my attention. We have not discussed that yet.
Well, I would say sincerely, that is a real challenge. Mr. Chairman, when I hear people talk about the concept of sequestering carbon, I will tell you, as somebody who served on regulatory agencies, the concept of permitting a site 2 miles down under 3 states, just boggles my mind that people really think that is doable under the existing process. And needing to understand that some of the challenge we're going to have in science is just getting government the hell out of the way and allowing people to accomplish their goals. And excuse the terminologies, but that's going to be the challenge. And the other challenge that I hope you guys are looking at is the political agenda getting in the way of scientific agendas. And you're going to hear me screaming bloody murder about this hell-bent lemming run to go to corn ethanol as somehow it's sustainable, when in fact I think everybody we're shaking their heads and just saying, well, everybody's jumping, so we might as well jump. And so I hope that the committee again looks at a lot of these things and brings back a degree of sanity from the scientific point of view for us who are forced to have to at least consider the political game.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr.
Are you suggesting that the NSF change the presidential caucus locations?
Yeah.
How
about if we just change the primary agenda or calendar so that certain parts of the country don't dictate agendas to the rest of the nation?
Points are well taken about the merits and the issues of regulatory concerns. I just have one final question. I've got to leave shortly, and I think others do as well. Regarding the major research equipment and facilities construction lines in the budget, and you don't necessarily have to answer this here, but we observe that there is, as far as we can tell, no horizon projects listed in that section of the budget. And my understanding is typically one would look ahead and say, okay, so what big things are down the road that we might want to look toward? Is there a reason for that? And,
yes.
and if there are some projects you're looking at, when might the committee and the Congress have a sense of what you see as on the next big thing, so to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll be glad to share that with you. There are horizon projects. Those are actively supported in our directorates, and they're actively discussed with the members of the board. We made a conscious decision not to publish horizon projects in our facilities plan, primarily because it sets expectations that just because we're considering them, that it's clear that they're going to be supported until they're actually constructed. Some of these projects the board may choose to accelerate along with the foundation. Some of them they may choose to bury in a shallow grave for a while. Some they may decide to terminate. We need to retain that flexibility in turning over opportunities for major facilities until such time that we're ready to go through conceptual design review, preliminary design review, and final design review, and readying these projects for submission to the Congress for funding.
I certainly respect the need for that flexibility. I just would make sure that there's an effort to give Congress as much heads up, especially
yes.
on the budgetary front, as we look ahead to what, you look at the Hadron setup, and that's not a cheap operation. And if we've got some of those down the road, we've got to have a look at that.
Obviously, it's in our best interest to do so, and we will.
Just a quick one. I hate to harp on the temperature of the room, but it did remind me of the icebreaker question. And I'm not talking,
That cold.
I'm not talking about cocktail party icebreakers. What's the situation with the Coast Guard, and has all that been worked out or not?
We still have a good working relationship with the Coast Guard. We give them a forecast of our needs. They give us their plan. We enter into negotiations on how we actually implement the plan. That's the ongoing process, and we'll continue to use that process.
Dr. Ehlers, I should interject. It's my hope that we can have a discussion with, I serve also on the Coast Guard Committee, and we have sort of two main issues met by the icebreakers, as you know, the scientific mission, but also the national security mission, and particularly with changes in the polar regions, especially the North Pole. We plan to have some meetings, probably informal meetings initially with the Coast Guard and Nsf, and see how we can work this out, because I'm not sure the funding stream makes a whole lot of sense.
Well, we'll certainly contribute to the science part of that discussion.
Committee members, if they have additional information they'd like to submit, or our panelists, witnesses, and with that, the hearing stands adjourned with the gratitude of the committee. Thank you very much for your work.
Thank you.